here. Up. Showing up. Is that presentation showing up?
You can see it.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You got harder to hear though.
Seems to be a day of Zoom technical issues.
That's
Okay.
better.
You sound fine now.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this is a kind of a repeat of some of the information that I provided the committee last month. Unfortunately, took a little bit longer to get the scope with HDR finalized, so we had to push this item out of cycle. So you'll see the study session dates this Wednesday with City Council the following week. So I thought instead of just sharing the same slides, I thought it might be beneficial just to kind of review the scope of the project. We've kind of been in the weeds on various topics on the project, so just wanted to maybe bring us back up a level, and then we can dive back into the weeds as needed. So just a reminder that the primary scope of this project is as a roadway rechannelization to improve safety and provide dedicated bicycle facilities. So west of Park Avenue, the rechannelization typically includes a removal of a vehicle through lane in each direction, adding on-street bike lanes and providing a center two-way left turn lane. East of Park Avenue, a little bit different cross-section there, and that typically involves kind of repurposing, reducing some of the existing on-street parking to provide those same continuous facilities. This slide just shows some quick stats and some talking points for the 4 to 3 lane conversion. I provided this. I've got some links at the bottom of this slide. Just there's a ton of studies and research out there on these types of rechannelization. So I would just encourage committee, any of the public on the call. There's a lot of great resources out there for these types of projects. I also thought it might be good to revisit some information that I presented this committee a year ago. So this was prior to executing HDR's contract, and the information that was presented was kind of focused on right-sizing the scope of the project, right? So finding that balance between a very limited scope of work and a very extensive scope of work. So, from a very limited standpoint, that's the just throw down paint. Rechannelize the roadway with paint and move forward with that project, right? And then the other end of the spectrum is a complete reconstruction of the project, more of a Naval Avenue style project where it's a full roadway reconstruction. You're adjusting the curb lines. So we tried to find that right balance and right sizing this project scope. You can see the feedback part of that allows us to be a little more flexible and coming up with some creative alternatives, trying to utilize the space as best possible. And then as far as just a quick overview of the assessment process. So when we started this project with HDR, what we did is we started with a baseline scope of work, and this baseline scope of work was kind of defined from some of the previous planning that we've done from the city. We've got safety studies. We also had an informational virtual meeting with the public early in the design process to get feedback and kind of hear some of the thoughts from the public, what they were seeing out in the corridor. So essentially what this slide shows is kind of that thought process, right? So we've got a baseline scope. And then we're putting design concepts into the baseline scope, and we're doing an evaluation. So the evaluation from a very high level is, are we achieving the project goals and outcomes? Does it align with the project scope and identified constraints? So keeping in mind that kind of balanced approach, and does it meet minimum design and operational requirements? From that point, we're able to kind of determine feasibility of alternatives, so that way we could consolidate alternatives that were presented to the public last November. The current contract with HDR, again, this is a repeat of information provided last month. We had, all the way from data collection at the beginning of the project. We had some design workshops internally. We met with some partner agencies, We had a virtual project information meeting and a in-person open house meeting. Both of those had survey opportunities for the public to comment. And the design reporting that's associated with this concept contract with HDR is in progress, but that's on hold pending further outreach on the project and refinement of the alternatives that were presented. So I believe the committee was provided a copy of HDR's kind of drafted amendment. This slide's a lot of text, but it kind of boils down kind of the four areas that this amendment covers. The biggest one with the most detail being just the refinement of the concept design. We really wanted to take the input that we heard from the public in November and at the virtual information meeting and go back to the drawing board to make some refinements to information that was previously communicated on the project. So it's going to take into account that previous input. As we spoke about, a few months back, we're going to be taking a look at vertical delineation from the bike lanes and incorporating additional vertical delineation as far as we can across the entire corridor. We're going to be taking a closer look at two of the busier intersections at Naval Avenue and Warren Avenue to look at operations, channelization, and safety. We're going to take a closer look at channelization east of Park Avenue. So this is specifically where we have on-street parking. So there's a little bit of, variation in that section that we want to take a closer look at. I know Melinda was on the call earlier, and she's also our parking manager. So we want to get into the weeds on the impacts of the parking in the downtown area. And then we also will be looking into possibly incorporating any additional guidance that came out through AASHTO and NACTO, which are two national, agencies that provide design guidance for bicycle facilities. The contract amendment includes additional community outreach, so we'll have a second in-person open house meeting with some of the refined concept design, another opportunity for feedback on those additional alternatives. We'll have some additional coordination with community partners. Of course, the majority of this amendment is for the final engineering design, the plan specifications and estimates to get us to a bid-ready design. And there are a handful of support services that HDR will be providing, including signal timing, a lighting evaluation, permit support, and bid phase services. This schedule was also provided last month. It's been refined just a little bit. So assuming this contract amendment moves forward, we would be looking to make refinements to the alternatives this spring to gear us up for another in-person open house meeting this summer. We would be looking to finalize the concept design phase late this summer and start final engineering. And that would put us in a good position to have the project shovel ready by Q1, Q2 of next year. The current budget for this contract modification is $374,000 and some change. Our current contract amount with HDR plus the amendment would come out to about $566,000. There's a couple of key contract assumptions. I just want to make sure, I know we've talked about these in the past, but we're going to be assuming that we're not going to be acquiring right-of-way on the project. So if you remember last November, we had one location, one alternative at Naval Avenue that did include some minor right-of-way acquisition at the intersection. Based on some costing that we've put together for that option, it looks like it's going to be cost prohibitive for us to acquire right-of-way at the intersection. I think I had previously sent out some correspondence to Jeff. I'm not sure, Jane, if you were on that email, just the order of magnitude as soon as we start touching the curb lines at that intersection and modifying replacing signal components and drainage and all the things that go along with widening a roadway. So that's one of the key assumptions on this contract. And the second is that we're not going to be making any significant changes to the corridor alternative. So we think we've come up with a really good balance of safety and operations given the constraints on the project. So obviously we are going to be looking at a lot of specific alternatives and areas of the project where we think we can make some refinements based on input that we've received. Didn't want to set an expectation that we're going to be coming at this next open house meeting with completely new alternatives. That's definitely not our current assumption with the contract. So I do have some other information I wanted to share, but I wanted to separate that discussion from the contract amendment. So I guess at this time I'll stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions, which I know there will be.
I have lots of questions.
Okay.
All right, starts off with the immediate assumption that staff and administration made that we were going to have a center turn lane down the whole roadway. And this is great for cars, but as usual, it really doesn't increase the safety for bike riders or pedestrians. And we need some other alternatives. I mean, the council has been consistent for the past 3 to 4 years that we need a shift, that roadways are not just for cars. We need safe alternatives for different modes of transportation. And this, I mean, we have showing left turn pockets where at peak hours, there's less than 7 cars turning. And to me, those turn pockets could be protected bike lanes. Frankly, the only place that I see that we need a center turn lane is by the Midtown and Noah's. And I don't see the need anywhere else. And frankly, a lot of the members of the community also don't see that. So we need an alternative. And you're doing this contract and you're saying, we're assuming we're not going to give an alternative to the public, and we need an alternative.
So with all due respect, I mean, our job as staff is to try to balance all the things that go into Complete Street. So, you know, we have expertise that focus on transportation planning, traffic studies, and you know, it's one thing for someone to take a snapshot of a peak hour count and see, you know, 7 vehicles in one direction and be like, why are we doing it? Why are we putting in a turn pocket, right? Well, that's not the full picture, right? There's a lot that goes into traffic evaluation. You know, we have our own standards at the city that we have right now, right? You know, I think there's a misconception that, you know, the center two-way left turn lane is just benefiting cars. So, you know, you think about 6th Street as a corridor, right? It's a commercial corridor. There's some residential sprinkled in there. You know, we've got, I think, almost 150 access points on that roadway. That's driveways, that's minor intersections. That's not including the traffic signals. It's a transit corridor. It's a designated freight route, even though, you know, there's probably not a lot of heavy.
It's not on any
traffic.
map. That designated freight route thing's got to go away because it doesn't show on any map.
Okay, well, yeah, and I understand that. I'm just telling you, you know, kind of this is a major corridor. There's over 13,000 vehicles that travel on 6th Street every day, right? So our job is to take all the needs of that corridor, all the safety issues that we know about, right? We know 6th Street is a high, you know, it's designated as a high injury network. Right. We had a 2020 study that showed, you know, the most prevalent crash types were rear end and angle type collisions. So you think about taking out that center two-way left turn lane, right? So what is that going to do? So that's going to increase rear end crashes. That's going to increase angle crashes. You know, it's going to prevent us from potentially putting in those hardened refuge areas for the enhanced crossings that we're trying to propose on the project. You know, it allows for emergency access. So there's been a lot of questioning on how these road diets impact emergency access. So that 3-way or the 3-lane section, that center lane provides a clear path for emergency vehicles, right? And it stabilizes flow. So as soon as you take out that center turn lane, you know, you're going to have these major platoons where you've got vehicles stopped when there's a vehicle in front of them waiting to turn left. So what's going to happen? You're going to get bad driver behavior. You're going to get people that are going to try to cut through neighborhoods. You're going to get people speeding up because they had to wait an extra, 45 seconds behind a vehicle. You're going to get people maybe being a little more risky and making illegal passing, or not as accepting on gaps between vehicles because they've got 10 cars behind them, backing up. So I say that with the utmost respect and understanding that we want safe bicycle facilities, but it truly is a balance. And we've spoken with our regional transportation experts that do this for a living, and they would not recommend taking out the center left turn lane on this project. So
which regional experts are you talking to? Like what other cities?
No, this is a consultant that does regional transportation planning and traffic engineering for other cities in the region.
Well, it seems weird because I look at Olympia, I look at Tacoma, I look at Seattle. There's all different agencies in Western Washington and frankly the whole world that are doing real traffic calming projects that allow for safety for cyclists and pedestrians. And this isn't doing it.
So so this is actually a really good conversation because I feel like we're in an identity crisis with this project, and I say that understanding like what we're hearing from the community. They want an all ages and abilities fully protected bike route. Like I would love to have that, right? What we were tasked with staff was to bring forward a retrofit rechannelization project that balances safety and operations for all modes of transportation. We cannot do that if it's a balancing act. So as soon as we modify the cross section, well, something has got to give, right? So are we okay with increases in rear end accidents and angle collisions by taking out a two-way left turn lane?
So who gave you that scope of the project?
This scope was laid out in multiple studies. So this was most recently the JCTP.
So can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you, Shane.
Okay, I'm sorry. It just doesn't sound very good here. So this project goes way back to the mid 2000s when it was called out as a road diet project in the non-motorized transportation plan, and then went out to the public in the comprehensive plan in 2015, 2016. We studied it again. I started working on the project in 2018, when we were trying to decide what type of facility that we wanted to put bicycle facilities on, when we looked at Burwell, 6th Street, and 11th Street. And at the end of that feasibility study, the recommendation was to put a rechannelization on 6th Street. And so we did another city safety plan. And then most recently in the JCTP, we did another open house, public open house in 2022, where we presented this rechannelization with a center turn lane in it as well. So it's been studied a lot over a lot of years, and we just didn't make up the scope. And if you go back to the JCTP, council actually had a resolution to adopt the JCTP that included the center turn lane in it, in the rechannelization. And so that scope was identified by council. It was through a resolution with the JCTP. And so that's what we took when we started this project, is the scope of work. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect there between, the work that we've done on this and then what we're trying to provide you. We're trying to provide you what you had in the JCTP as part of that resolution process.
Well, in the JCTP, it also said that neither Naval Avenue or 6th Street had any effect on base access. And yet the arguments that you're using on both Naval and 6 is, well, we have to put in right turn lanes and we have to do this to maintain base access. So, I mean, if you're going to look at the JCTP, you have to look at the whole thing, not just pick out the parts that fit this plan.
Yeah, and I think Jane, that when you take a look at overall planning documents, we don't look in granular detail about the specific projects until we start designing them. And I think that's kind of sort of where you see, okay, well, yes, on a planning document, this is what we want to put in general, right? But when we start to actually look at it into detail, that's when we come up with these things where it's like, yeah, this is something that, we need to address as part of this project because it does not meet our BMC or it does not meet the standards, so we need to address it. So, I think that, the planning documents are good from an overall higher level point of view. But yeah, there are always devils in the details that, Jane, we need to look at when we design these projects once we are able to do that in more detail.
All right, Jeff, you want to talk a bit?
Sure, sounds good. My camera just died. No, that's right. So, yeah, I've got a number of.
Can you guys see our hands raised? Can you see the gallery, Jane, and see?
Oh.
No, I can't.
Okay, so I guess I thought you were running the meeting and my hand's raised, but that's okay, Jeff. You go ahead.
No, it's not showing up on mine. I'm sorry, Ned.
Okay, yeah. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Either way, James. I don't think we're too far apart on some of what the community is asking for, some of what's this contract. I have some bigger, higher level things and then some smaller ones. And I want to start with the high level is the schedule. And again, my goal is just to make sure that it's a project with a lot of interest and a lot of passion. And so I want to make sure it goes smoothly. And one concern that I brought up before is having some more checkpoints before we proceed to make sure that everyone's on board. And right now, as I read the contract, it seems like once this is approved by council, it's going all the way to 100% design. And I think to make this successful, we need to add at least a checkpoint after, let me get to the actual contract here.
Can you explain what you mean by that? I don't understand what you mean by
checkpoint
points throughout the design. I don't.
Well, this comes back to council with an approval to proceed.
So, at various stages during the design, you want to have a document come to council for approval. So we've got council approving the 30%, the 60%, the 90% design. That's what you want?
No, let me finish my thought. So
Okay.
I think an approval, I see two approvals, and it's at the early stages here to ensure success. One I can see is after the refined alternatives development role plot. So that's just a bit of a checkpoint before it goes out to the public as a whole. And then the second one is after the 30% design comes out, or right before it. And what I want to do is just make sure that what has been proposed to be studied and the scope of work is studied, that we have a second to get public input and make sure, not that everyone's happy because you'll never get 100%, but that the folks have been heard and that we have a chance as council to make sure that what's been requested is done. And I think if we put those checkpoints in early, that'll really help ensure success. And I could see it by either approving a more limited scope of work overall, and we revisit this and get a third contract amendment, or we just write in language here that we want council's approval to proceed.
I have to admit, I'm a little lost. When you say you want to make sure that what's been asked for has been done, I think that's what you said. I might have just misquoted you. What do you mean by that? Like if there's, we don't want a two-way left turn lane, so we want to make sure that doesn't exist before we approve moving forward with the design? Or are you saying that you want to make sure there's an evaluation, a reasonable evaluation of, the viability of that? What are you saying there?
Yeah, so I have several items, and maybe it helps to talk about those first on modifying the scope of work to include some of the public comment. So I want to ensure that what the contract has said would be studied is actually studied, right? I want to make sure that council just has a check, and therefore all the stakeholders in the project has a chance to weigh in on if folks feel good that what was understood collectively to be studied was. So what alternatives are going to be put on the table are put on there. Because again, my goal is to make sure that everything that is viable, is on the table for folks to look at. And that we're able to come up with a final alternative from all those options that's within scope and budget and cost.
I think we have kind of a hard spot with, we're trying to balance not just throughput, like everyone keeps saying that we're worried about throughput. Transportation operations isn't just about throughput, right? And I think we're concerned about more accidents, less driver safety, honestly, on the corridor. Like there's people in cars. When cars get in wrecks, people get hurt. We don't want accidents. We don't want bike serious injuries. We don't want bike fatalities. We don't want pedestrian accidents. So we're trying to balance like with a corridor that's established that doesn't have a budget right now for any right-of-way or reconstruction that's meaningful, right? This was supposed to be a rechannelization project, which really means striping with maybe some other signal improvements or maybe some other, hardening improvements also. So, but we're trying to balance the safety for all the users, and that's what complete streets means. It's transit, it's cars, it's bikes, and it's peds, right? It's not bikes first and then cars. It's like we're trying to balance the operation for all of it. And I personally, I think that the two-way left turn lane is an important part of that balanced approach for all the reasons that Nick gave earlier, honestly. So
I think you lost me a little. We were talking about the way to structure the contract to have some checkpoints in.
I know, but there's a fundamental difference in like layout of the channelization of this project that we keep. It's really like we want protected bike lanes, and what does that mean, right? How wide does a protected bike lane have to be, and what is the protection? And I know there's a really strong interest in eliminating the left turn pockets, right turn pockets. Now I'm talking about naval, I guess. Left turn pockets, right turn pockets, and this two-way center left turn lane because we think it provides more opportunity for wider protected bike lanes. I think that's, is that accurate? Yeah, is that
we could dive into specifics and then come back to checkpoints if that's helpful.
Well, I think fundamentally we have an issue with that because we're trying to follow good transportation design. We listen to our consultants that have a lot of experience. We just had a long conversation with them about some of the alignments that have been proposed. And I don't know if that's a good time to talk about that, Nick, or not, but they don't agree with eliminating the two-way left turn lane. And these are people who have been working in the transportation design profession in multiple jurisdictions, are well respected in the Puget Sound area for the owner, I think, for decades, quite honestly. So
I hadn't mentioned that personally yet. It's part of my op. Like, why don't I just start going through some of the specifics I've heard from the community?
I'll shut up.
No, it's okay. Let me go in the order I wrote them down. So, Section 5.01 of the contract kind of lays out a lot of the alternatives. And under there, number 2, right now the language is further evaluation and alternative refinement for channelization and traffic operations at 6th and Naval. And one thing that's come up from community members is that, this of course is going to be the main intersection of our 2 new non-motorized corridors, 6th and Naval. And this is a really great opportunity to just put in some basic protection for a protected intersection. And I've seen some really great drawings that can get it done without requiring any additional right-of-way. And so I would just like the language here to be specific that a protected intersection would be considered. I'm not saying it's 100% viable from what I've seen. I think it looks definitely worth pursuing. So I just want the contract to reflect that will be looked at. Is that possible?
So I think we can certainly incorporate that language, right? When you use the word protected intersection, right? So there is not actually there's a lot of good guidance that NACDO has on protected intersections. AASHTO's got some guidance, right? So those design guides aren't really geared towards retrofit projects where you're not doing a full reconstruction. So I would want to use the term protected very loosely, because this is not going to be a situation where we're going to get a per a desirable design for a protected intersection, right? So, some hardening elements, things like that, certainly, right? But, I would want to be really careful about, maybe putting a perception out there that a protected intersection is viable under the scope of this project, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to work to find the right language. Specifically, the design I've seen, keeps the bike lanes along the curbs. There's no mixing zone. And then it's a specific layout that has essentially at each corner where the, pedestrian crossings would be and the bikes would come to, there's essentially just a little hardened island. And, that could either start out as a temporary barrier that gets adjusted, or it could be actually poured concrete. But it protects, it's an extra protection for pedestrians and bicyclists. And so it's kind of a simple and easy way to have some protection there on the way it's laid out. So it's just something I think should be on the table, whatever the right wording for that is, and we could look at the diagram together.
Jeff, are you envisioning? I should probably let you finish your list, but do you have a perspective of adding like an alternatives analysis scope to this project where we look at multiple alternatives and do selection? That's kind of where you're headed. Is that right?
Yeah, because I really think it was some great work in the first iteration that had different alternatives already on the table, A and B. I think we're just talking about adding in a few more and then coming up with a final preferred alternative that is maybe all A's or maybe a mixture.
Okay, alternatives analysis with cost and then a public process to make a selection. That's your vision.
Yeah, I think that was done for Warren Bridge. It was done for I think Kitsap Way, SR 3.75 study. So it's a smaller dollar project, but it's a high interest one.
So the only potential concern that I'm thinking out loud here, right, is we've had a lot of back and forth on operations at the intersections, and we had at the end of the day, right now we're at 2 right turn lanes that operationally we feel are needed to balance the operations and safety. So that's the eastbound right turn lane at Naval and the westbound at Warren, right? So my only concern would be as soon as we look at an option which provides bike lane protection, I'll call it components of a protected intersection, right? Because I don't think a fully protected intersection is viable. That's probably going to require us to look at eliminating that eastbound right turn lane at Naval, which if we do that, I think we just have to. I'm just thinking out loud here on how we kind of navigate areas where, hey, we're hearing from the public that we want this, but it's a trade-off because now we don't have something else on the project, right? So it's just, it's going to be maybe a little bit of effort for us to kind of figure out how to communicate those to the public in a way that makes sense and could clearly lay out, the pros and cons of or considerations of